The sky was too blue for what was about to happen. Tyrese Cole had just made the turn off Highway 12, a narrow gravel road that cut through the woods like a scar. The late afternoon sun glinted off his windshield, and in the distance, cicadas cried like broken radios. He wasn't speeding, wasn't swerving, just driving the same path he'd taken every week to his dad's auto shop, where the smell of oil and coffee meant safety. But the peace cracked when he noticed them, two pickup trucks idling in the shade, unmoving, like wolves pretending to nap. He should have trusted his gut. When one truck peeled out and blocked the road ahead and the other swung in behind him, he didn't panic. Not yet. Not until three men stepped out wearing camouflage pants, black boots, and matching grins that didn't belong in daylight. No badges. No emergency lights. Just one of them dragging a baseball bat across the gravel as he walked. Tyrese locked the doors, reached for his phone, started recording. They laughed. One of them, the tall one with a red Southern Suns patch on his vest, leaned forward and tapped the glass with his knuckle. "You lost, boy?" he said, dragging out the word like poison. Tyrese didn't answer, just stared straight ahead, heart pounding like it was knocking from the inside out. He knew what this was. Knew this wasn't a joke or some harmless hazing. This was racial intimidation, the kind that lives in court records labeled hate crime. The kind that doesn't always make it to court at all. Another man pulled out a cell phone and started filming like this was a show. "Smile for the freedom cam," he joked. "Let's teach this punk what happens when you drive through our county looking like you own something." Tyrese hit send on his GPS app, a silent signal, a habit his dad made him promise to follow. Seconds later, they smashed his phone against the ground. He barely had time to register the shatter before the back door yanked open and rough hands dragged him into the dust. His knees hit gravel. The bat hovered inches from his spine. And still he didn't scream. Miles away, in a quiet garage lined with forgotten metals, a man looked down at his phone. No signal, just a blinking dot that had suddenly gone dark. The man's name was Darius Cole. He didn't curse, didn't shout. He just stood, opened a steel cabinet no one had touched in years, and pulled out something older than anger. Discipline. Focus. Silence with a purpose. They thought they were hunting a boy. They didn't know they'd just declared war on a ghost, a legend trained to disappear, built to extract, and wired to protect at all costs. And this time it was personal. Darius Cole hadn't pulled a trigger in 5 years. Not since the day he folded up his last uniform, placed his trident in a velvet case, and promised his wife he was done. Done vanishing in deserts, done hunting shadows through war zones no map dared name. Done watching his son grow up through encrypted video calls. These days, he worked out of a quiet garage in Clayton County, fixing alternators and brake lines, trading war stories for socket wrenches. But the precision never left him. Neither did the instinct, especially not now. The red dot on Tyrese's GPS didn't just blink. It vanished. That wasn't a glitch. It was a signal. The app he made his son install was connected to a shadow system Darius had written himself. No store, no cloud, just code and silence. If the dot disappeared without warning, it meant someone had cut off Tyrese's ability to call, stream, or even scream. Darius's jaw tightened. He shut off the shop lights with a flick. Outside, the sun had just begun its slow dive into the Georgia tree line. He moved like a man who didn't need light to see, into the locked side closet, past the rusted tires and forgotten tools, to the fireproof cabinet sealed by fingerprint. The metal clicked open. Inside, nothing glowed, nothing sparkled. Just matte black folded gear. A Glock 19 Gen 5. Tactical radio. One Kevlar vest, compressed but not forgotten. A knife, worn but sharpened last week, just in case. He didn't even have to think. Muscle memory dressed him. Meanwhile, Tyrese was still on his knees in the dirt. His mouth was dry, not from fear, but from how long he'd kept it shut. That silence was his shield. That, and the thing they hadn't found yet. The hidden body cam stitched inside his hoodie seam, recording every sneer, every bootstep, every boy spat like poison. He could barely see the screen, but he knew the red light meant the footage was safe. Cloud uploaded, locked to an auto-sent link to his father's private server. Bodycam footage, whether on a cop or a civilian, didn't lie. And in a town like this, it was the only witness that couldn't be coerced. "Stand up," the tall one barked. "You got something to say?" Tyrese didn't flinch. "I said stand." A ringtone shattered the moment. Country music. Cheap speaker. One of the men picked up his phone, walking a few feet off. And just like that, the tension cracked. The bat lowered a few inches. Tyrese's breathing calmed. He knew how to use seconds like that. That's what his father taught him. Threats distract themselves. Use it. So while the third man shifted to answer the call, Tyrese turned his head enough to scan the road. Still no help. Still no headlights. But a sound drifted out of the trees. A second vehicle. Low. Silent. Then parked. Not from the main road, from the woods. A path no one was supposed to know. The men didn't hear it, but Tyrese recognized the sound. The idling hum of a hybrid SUV with tires built for off-road extraction. Same one his dad used when the family went hiking. Except this time, it wasn't carrying granola bars and fishing poles. Darius stepped out slow. Black vest, gloves, no insignia. He didn't carry a gun visible, just a calm silence that rolled in like fog. Tyrese's eyes met his, just for a split second, and that's when the boy finally exhaled. The three men still hadn't turned around. That was about to change. Darius didn't walk fast. He didn't need to. His presence split the air like a blade through old cotton. Silent, decisive, unnatural for any man not trained to kill in silence. The crunch of leaves under his boots was the only warning the three men got before one of them finally turned. "You lost, old man?" The speaker was broad-shouldered, jaw heavy with chewing tobacco, wearing a Sheriff's Academy sweatshirt, not a badge, but close enough to mean he'd been trusted by someone with one. Darius didn't answer. His eyes scanned everything. Hands, weapons, angles, exits. The boy was unharmed. Bruised, maybe, but conscious. Good. That meant they hadn't broken the skin yet. And the fact that no one had started recording meant these men weren't just acting out of impulse. This wasn't random. This was staged, targeted, organized. A hate crime disguised as a warning. "You heard him," said another. "This is private land. Back the hell off or you're next." Tyrese didn't move. He just watched his father's posture shift, barely perceptible, the way only soldiers or predators understood. One shoulder slightly lowered, foot angled just enough to pivot, center of gravity lowered, casual to the untrained eye but loaded like a spring. "You boys local?" Darius finally asked, voice flat as gravel. The tall one, the one who'd swung the bat earlier, stepped closer. "You talk like you know this place." "I know it better than you think." He was buying seconds, measuring their reaction time, counting how far the bat was from Tyrese's ribs, calculating what it would take to disarm two with hands, distract the third, extract the boy, and neutralize the situation without blood. But what changed everything wasn't the men, it was the sound. A sheriff's patrol truck pulled up just past the tree line, lights off, engine humming. Then 2 doors opened. Not fast, not slow, just enough time for Darius to realize this wasn't rescue. It was reinforcement. The officer who stepped out was gray-haired, belt sagging under too many years of unchecked authority. He didn't yell, didn't even pretend to care about the bat or the bruised boy or the man in black standing too calmly for a father. He just said, "That him?" The tall one nodded. "Yeah, that's the one been stirring up trouble with that scholarship stuff." Darius's eyes narrowed. "Scholarship? Your boy been giving speeches talking about equity. You think that don't get back to people? Ah, there it was. This wasn't just a hate crime, it was retaliation. Tyrese had been chosen for a civil rights youth scholarship, backed by the NAACP and a local education equity board. He'd spoken at a town meeting, just once, about racially motivated suspensions in schools. A few teachers applauded, a few didn't. And someone in that room had clearly made a call. The sheriff stepped closer now, hand casually resting on his holster. Now, I don't know who you think you are, mister, but out here we handle things our way. You got a complaint? File it. Otherwise, I suggest you step aside. Darius tilted his head just slightly. You sure you want to say that again, with your body cam off? That made the sheriff pause, just for a second. You ain't got nothing to prove I said anything, he smirked. That's when Tyrese stood. Bruised knees, dirt on his hoodie, and a slow, confident breath as he reached into his waistband. Not for a weapon, but for a small black device the size of a car key. He tapped once. The light blinked. Livestream's been active for the past 5 minutes, Sheriff. You've got 2,000 people watching you right now. Maybe more. Comments are already asking for badge numbers. The silence was a crack of thunder. The tall one cursed under his breath. The third man stepped back. The sheriff's jaw tightened, but his hand drifted from his holster. Darius stepped beside his son, finally letting a breath out through his nose. We don't run. We document. We fight with evidence. And if you think for 1 second that the federal government won't be reviewing this footage tomorrow, you've already lost. Tyrese didn't look scared anymore. He looked like he came from a man who'd survived the worst men on earth. Because he had. And now the real reckoning would begin. Tyrese didn't flinch when the sheriff muttered something under his breath and turned back toward the patrol truck. The boy simply held the live streaming device higher, the comments now rolling so fast they blurred into white noise. Expose them. Tagging CNN now. Where's the badge number? The internet wasn't just watching, it was hunting. But the sheriff wasn't done. He clicked his radio once, not for backup, for erasure. 10-7 all units, no further response needed. Situation secure. He wasn't broadcasting for help, he was silencing it. That's when the third man in the woods pulled a taser, not on Darius, but on Tyrese. The angle was perfect, just outside the camera frame, behind a tree. He moved fast, likely ex-military. But Darius had seen faster men fail harder. He stepped into the arc, grabbed the wrist mid-surge, and twisted until the pop of a dislocated shoulder cut through the woods like a gunshot. The taser dropped. The man screamed, and Tyrese, still recording, panned slightly to show the full takedown. Police brutality? No. This was self-defense, and it was caught on camera. Within minutes, the first cruiser with lights flashing pulled in, a young black female officer behind the wheel, Officer Amani Reyes. She stepped out with hand on her weapon, unsure who the aggressor was. Darius lifted both hands slowly, revealing his military ID and quietly saying, "Live stream. Threat neutralized. One confirmed assault attempt on my son." Officer Reyes scanned the scene. Her eyes settled on Tyrese. "Are you okay?" He nodded. She moved toward the injured man. That's when the sheriff barked, "Officer Reyes, you're relieved. You're not needed here." And that's when it hit everyone. Even within the force, race was the dividing line. Officer Reyes didn't budge. "With respect, sir, this is now under civilian complaint protocol, and I'm a mandated reporter." Her body cam blinked green, and she tapped it. The sheriff's jaw locked. He didn't expect loyalty to law. He expected obedience. But Reyes had trained under federal watch, and she'd had enough of police misconduct swept under small-town rugs. She cuffed the man with the dislocated arm, read him his rights, and for the first time that day, the law felt real. But it didn't last long. Another unit arrived, and this time Deputy Cole Westbrook stepped out, a man with a patchy beard and history that no one spoke about publicly, but every black family in town remembered. He didn't ask questions. He walked straight to Darius. "Turn around. You're under arrest for inciting violence," Tyrese shouted. "He protected me!" But the deputy wasn't listening, because this wasn't about law. This was about humiliation, about showing a black man, even one with medals, that here, power still had a color. As Westbrook tightened the cuffs, Darius looked him dead in the eye. "You sure you want to put your name on this?" Westbrook grinned. "Too late." That's when Tyrese stepped forward, trembling but resolute. "Actually, sir," he said, "my name is Tyrese Cole. I'm 17, and this detainment violates both state protocol and federal statute under Title 42, Section 1983. The forest went silent. Even Reyes turned to look. Westbrook scoffed. "Kid, you watch too much TV." But Tyrese didn't blink. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded document. "This is a copy of the federal civil rights grant I received last week, co-signed by 3 senators and the Department of Justice." His voice didn't shake. "Your badge number's already been submitted." And in that moment, as the air thickened with realization, as Westbrook's smirk curdled into something colder, it was no longer a battle between men. It was a federal oversight case in real time. The forest cleared out fast, but not because people were running. They were filming. Within seconds, 4 separate phones were angled at Westbrook, Officer Reyes, Tyrese, and the restrained suspect, groaning in pain. The algorithm wasn't just watching, it was compiling, auto-captioning, geotagging. "Body cam footage isn't enough anymore," one voice said behind a screen. "We live stream justice now." And as Tyrese's clip went viral under the hashtag civil rights in real time, one word kept repeating in the comment threads: DOJ. Back at the sheriff's office, a call came through, encrypted and brief. It wasn't from local news. It was from an internal affairs investigator from D.C., flagged by the sudden spike in civilian complaints and facial recognition hits on Deputy Westbrook. Darius's name had triggered a subdirectory, Seal 4 clearance, Operation Dust Vow, a long classified mission. The woman on the phone didn't introduce herself. She simply asked, "Is Darius Cole in custody?" The receptionist stammered. "He was just booked." A beat. Then, "Unbook him, immediately, and tell the sheriff. He's now under review for obstruction of federal jurisdiction." The line went dead. In the holding cell, Darius sat on the bench, wrists bruised, lips silent. Until the door opened again. Not Westbrook, not Reyes, but Agent Miriam Reese from the Department of Justice, in plain clothes and heels that echoed like thunder. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "we've been tracking this clan for 8 months. We didn't expect your son to be the lightning rod, but he's drawn more eyes to this town in 1 hour than our last 3 field agents did in 6. She slid a folder across the table. Inside, printed stills, redacted files, and one crisp image. A hooded figure, torch in hand, standing behind Westbrook's patrol truck. "Do you recognize this man?" Darius's stare hardened. "That's their leader." Reese nodded. "And he's your neighbor." Meanwhile, Tyrese was taken home under escort. But something felt off. The cruiser never turned toward their neighborhood. It veered down a country road lined with pine and rusted signs. "You missed the turn," he said. The officer kept driving. Tyrese's hand crept toward his phone. Then the car stopped. 3 men stepped from the woods, not in uniform. Faces blurred by cheap masks. The back door clicked open. "Out!" one of them growled. But as Tyrese stepped out, phone still rolling, a single drone hummed above them, unnoticed. It was federal surveillance, launched hours earlier from a rooftop 4 blocks away, and the feed was now playing live on a screen inside Agent Reese's vehicle. The men closed in. One of them reached for Tyrese's hoodie. "Little lawyer boy think he's cute?" he sneered. Tyrese stepped back, hands raised. "This is a civil rights violation," he said. You're being recorded under a DOJ investigation." They laughed. One grabbed for him. And that's when the sound cracked through the trees. Not gunfire, not shouting, but the sharp snap of someone dislocating an elbow mid-air. One man screamed. The other crumpled from a kick to the ribs, so precise it felt surgical. Standing behind them in full gear, not police, but Darius, dressed in his old SEAL desert camo, shoulder holster gleaming under the moonlight. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, "Touch my son again, and I'll make sure this town doesn't bury your story. It'll broadcast it." The third man tried to run, but the drone had already locked him. And the next morning, national headlines would read, "Retired Navy SEAL rescues son from hate crime, full incident caught on DOJ surveillance." The town hadn't had this many satellite trucks parked along Main Street since the tornado warning in '96, but this time the storm wasn't weather, it was justice, barreling through in waves of federal oversight and public outrage. By 10 a.m., the courtroom was at full capacity. News crews, civil rights attorneys, anonymous donors, and even former students of Darius Cole had flown in from across the country. The sign outside still read, "County Courthouse." But inside, it felt more like a reckoning. Tyrese sat at the plaintiff's table, no longer in school clothes, but in a pressed navy suit, tie centered, jaw set. The courtroom whispered around him. A boy who'd once been mocked for reading constitutional law at lunch was now about to deliver a statement that could open a federal case. Agent Miriam Reese sat behind him, silent, watching. She didn't need to coach him. He was built for this. Darius stood beside her, arms folded, still, sharp, like a weapon sheathed but never forgotten. Judge Holloway entered, the same man who once called Tyrese too emotional for logic. The irony didn't go unnoticed. As the courtroom rose, the cameras panned, and across the aisle, Sheriff Westbrook avoided eye contact. Reyes was nowhere to be seen. The prosecution tried to delay the hearing, citing procedural confusion. But Reese stepped forward, dropping a manila envelope on the clerk's desk. "New evidence," she said. "DOJ surveillance, high definition, time-stamped." The judge adjusted his glasses. "You may proceed." Tyrese rose. No script, no notes, just a memory that burned too hot to forget. He walked to the center like a lawyer born in a war zone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," he began, "my name is Tyrese Cole. I'm 18 years old, and I'm not here to ask for pity. I'm here to document what happens when the system ignores its own rules, until a camera forces it to remember." The video began to play. Body cam footage first, muffled audio, shaky hands, the words, "boy fits the profile," echoing. Then drone footage, crisp, clear, undeniable. 3 masked men approaching Tyrese. The attempted abduction. The sudden ambush. Darius's silent takedown. The room held its breath. A journalist in the back whispered, "This isn't a case, it's a documentary in real time." Then came the financial trail. Bank deposits linked to Westbrook's campaign, an anonymous group funneling money through a shell nonprofit tied to private security contracts. Reese laid it out in cold, methodical language. This wasn't just misconduct. It was a system built to protect itself, until it ran into someone trained to dismantle systems. Gasps rippled through the room. And then, the final twist. Tyrese pulled out a letter, a handwritten note from one of the attackers, found crumpled in a ditch, now verified by DOJ forensics. The letter confessed to the planned attack, the motive, and worse, named local officials as complicit. It wasn't just a few rogue men in masks, it was sanctioned. Judge Holloway leaned back in his chair, paled, quiet. Tyrese looked him dead in the eye. "You once called me ignorant. But ignorance is believing silence keeps you safe." Darius didn't need to say a word. His legacy was now standing in court, speaking with precision honed by years of listening, observing, surviving. The judge cleared his throat. "This court will recess for DOJ custody to take over jurisdiction, effective immediately." Outside, the crowd erupted. But inside, the silence said everything. Power had shifted, and this time the law had been forced to listen. Judge Holloway had barely declared the recess before federal agents entered through the rear doors, silent, swift, and unmistakable. DOJ insignias glinted under the courtroom lights as Agent Reese handed over sealed arrest warrants. The first name on the list, Sheriff Cal Westbrook. The courtroom fell into a hushed spiral. The sheriff didn't protest. He didn't speak. He simply stood, shoulders sinking under decades of unchecked power finally collapsing in on itself. Tyrese remained still, calm. But his grip on the podium tightened as Westbrook passed by, shackled at the wrists. Their eyes met briefly. The man who once smirked while calling Tyrese boy now couldn't hold the teenager's gaze for more than a second. Then came the surprise arrest. A bailiff whispered to Reese, and she turned sharply toward Judge Holloway. "Per DOJ findings," she said aloud, "you're under investigation for obstruction of justice and enabling hate-motivated crimes under color of law." The silence cracked. The judge blinked. You have no authority to—" But the courtroom wasn't his anymore. Two agents stepped forward. "You once told me my voice didn't matter," Tyrese said softly, just loud enough. Turns out it just hadn't been recorded yet. As Holloway was led out, the court erupted. The press scrambled, cameras flashing like lightning strikes at dusk. Tyrese walked back to his seat. But what waited for him wasn't just applause. It was a new beginning, a new power. Outside, protesters who had gathered in uncertainty now roared in celebration. Justice, they said, had finally pierced the armor of a system built to protect itself. Body cam footage, hate crime investigation, federal oversight, and civil rights violations. Terms that once felt distant were now on everyone's lips, fueled by a 16-year-old who refused to let silence have the last word. A special federal commission was immediately formed. Reese would oversee it. Darius quietly declined a formal role, but offered to train incoming recruits on tactical restraint and trauma-informed de-escalation. "Let me teach them what I never got to show the enemy," he said. In the following days, media flooded the airwaves. Viral clips, headlines. Tyrese's courtroom speech aired on 60 Minutes. Civil rights attorneys called him a once-in-a-generation voice. Schools began teaching excerpts from his testimony. A scholarship fund was launched in his name for youth wrongfully profiled. And somewhere, in a quiet bedroom with cracked windows and a desk light still on, Tyrese kept writing. Same notebook, same pen. Only now, the world was listening. The storm passed, but the air was never quite the same again. In the weeks that followed, the town of Elridge began to peel itself open, slowly, unevenly, like a scar that had finally been acknowledged. Statues came down. Street names were changed. And for the first time in living memory, the sheriff's office had no Confederate flag folded in a drawer for tradition. But Tyrese didn't chase the spotlight. While the country debated his courage, dissected his speech, and tried to turn his story into headlines, he quietly returned to school. Same hallway, same locker, but everything had shifted. Now teachers paused when he spoke. Students who once mocked his books now carried them. And Principal Garnett, the one who used to tell him to tone it down, now asked if he'd speak at graduation. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the cracked bleachers of the school's football field, Tyrese sat beside his father. Just the two of them. No cameras, no microphones, only silence, wind, and something deeper, the sound of generations beginning to heal. "You did what I never could," Darius said finally, his voice soft, heavy. "You fought without lifting a fist." Tyrese shook his head. "You taught me how to fight. I just rewrote the battlefield." For all the talk of justice and legal reform and civil rights investigations, what the world didn't see was the moment that mattered most. A father and a son, sharing peace where there used to be fear. And in that moment, Tyrese wasn't the viral kid, or the courtroom genius, or the teenage civil rights hero. He was just a boy. Black, brilliant, free. The case would lead to sweeping changes, DOJ reforms, FBI supervision in rural law enforcement, and a new federal mandate requiring transparency in hate crime investigations. But more important than the legislation was the signal it sent to every child who'd ever been told they were too loud, too emotional, too different to belong. You are not the problem. The system is. And if the system won't make space for you, then maybe, just maybe, you were born to redesign it. Tyrese's story wasn't just a win for one boy. It was a blueprint for every silent kid in the back of the classroom, for every father who hides his trauma behind training, for every community that's been told justice doesn't live here. Because now they know it can. Sometimes all it takes is one spark, wrapped in teenage skin, armed with law books, and sharpened by love. And for the first time in Elridge's long, painful history, justice didn't come too late. It came with a name. Tyrese Cole.